It's been a while and I'm still a Star Trek fan, regardless of Star Trek's recent efforts to stop that via television. So I think it's time to go back and give you 3 more Star Trek theories. First up, there's a lot of confusion about Chief O'Brien's rank and the seemingly contradictory evidence about it. In real life, it's because they gave Colin Meaney a random low rank, and then didn't keep very good continuity. He was an ensign in Farpoint, then a lieutenant junior grade, and finally they settled on Chief Petty Officer.
Let me take you to...
Always good to meet another Chief Petty Officer.
But what's going on in universe? It's actually not quite as complicated as it might seem. We know O'Brien is enlisted and never went to the academy. But we also know he served during the Cardassian Federation War and became a tactical officer in the Phoenix.
This was my tactical officer on the Rutledge. Best I ever had.
Thank you, sir.
And these 2 facts explain the discrepancy. He clearly impressed Maxwell enough to promote him, but maybe Starfleet also has a rule that someone with a bridge role on a starship needs to have an actual commissioned rank, provisional or otherwise. This would also explain why Wesley was an acting ensign, why the counselor needs a rank, and even why the captain promoted the cadets in Valiant. Of course, the obvious issue with this is the Defiant. O'Brien was a bridge officer on it. But maybe it's treated differently than the Enterprise because it's connected to Deep Space Nine.
Officially, it's classified as an escort vessel.
Like maybe it's technically considered something more like a large runabout. And fun fact, the original idea for the Defiant was for it to be a large runabout, called the Valiant. Okay, so after the war, he's transferred to the Enterprise, where he has his own con position, and eventually gets promoted off-screen to Lieutenant Junior grade. But he's also brought something else from the war, PTSD.
It's not you I hate, Cardassian. I hate what I became. Because of you.
I think O'Brien requested a demotion and a move away from the bridge because of stress. I think he wanted the job of transporter chief because it gave him a quiet life with minimal action, and it let him do what he joined Starfleet to do, to work with technology and improve it. And this was his attempt to heal. And why the demotion? Because he didn't want to be in the chain of command again. He didn't think he was up to the job, especially in a high danger situation, which it would be if a lieutenant junior grade was put in charge. I think over years of hard work he eventually got himself into a position where he felt he could handle more responsibility, and this is why he requested the job on DS9. It was quiet, it was far from the action, it was a giant engineering project. It let him do something bigger in his comfort zone. Of course, DS9 would end up being even more stressful and dangerous than he ever could have dreamed of, but he stuck it out to the end, and when the Dominion War finally finished, when he could enjoy the quiet life with his friends on the station, what did he do? He left and moved back to Earth to teach.
I've been offered a position at the Starfleet Academy, Professor of Engineering. When the war's over.
It's like his move from the bridge. The war reopened his old wounds and he needs to heal all over again. And where, in that era of Trek, is more quiet and less dangerous than Earth? I'm sure that none of this was planned, but it lines up perfectly. It even lines up perfectly with O'Brien's holosuite programs of choice, kayaking with the safeties off, and war games with Julian. The kayaking is him choosing to experience danger in a controlled way, and the war games are him reliving his experiences but many times removed, like a veteran today playing Call of Duty. O'Brien would never do a recreation of the Cardassian War, but something like the Alamo is far enough removed, and he does it with his best friend. He's experiencing comradeship again, but in safety. Only tangentially related to this, but kayaking with the safeties off is more dangerous than liking, subscribing, and hitting the bells in grabbing distance. Anyway, Romulan foreheads. This is my explanation of why some Romulans have thick foreheads, a characteristic never seen in Vulcans who they're meant to be physically identical to. Now, the reason for the forehead was that early TNG was trying to be different from TOS, and it was a very bad call. But why in universe? I have a rather horrifying reason. We know the Romulans left Vulcan en masse and spent a long time searching for a new home. Unless this was retcon, they left in subwarp ships, so this was a several generation journey. A group of enclosed ships like that does not really bode well for the health of the group. As they have more generations, the chances of inbreeding skyrockets. So what if the Romulans stopped off en route and picked up breeding stock? Compatible species to add much needed genetic diversity. We know that pre-Surak, Vulcans were monstrous, and that's what the Proto-Romulans were. What if one of the places they stopped off was Kronos? This was before the Herc, before the Klingons had warp or transporters or disruptors or anything. All they would need to do is enter orbit, do some scans, and start kidnapping. So why do I think they chose the Klingons? Well, something's got to start the Klingon-Romulan antipathy, but that's not the main thing. The ridges. That's where the TNG-style Romulans got them. They've got more visible Klingon ancestry. But apart from that, there was also a Next Generation episode called The Enemy, where there's a critically injured Romulan, and the only person on the Enterprise who's a suitable donor who can save his life is Worf.
There is a substance within my cells which you need to survive.
I would rather die than pollute my body with Klingon filth.
There were 1,000 people on the Enterprise. There were Vulcan crew members. The chances that no one on board was a Vulcan is basically zero. Hell, we know that Dr. Solar was on the Enterprise from at least Series 2 through 6. Okay, maybe Dr. Solar did a Dr. Crusher and left for a while, but really, how likely is it that there were no Vulcans on board? And even beyond all that, how likely is it that a Klingon is the only possible donor? Unless, like I'm suggesting, Romulans have some Klingon ancestry due to generations of sex slavery. We know that Romulans are not opposed to sex slavery, and they will accept children born from it as full Romulans. Just look at Sela.
He is human. And humans have a way of showing up when you least expect them.
Maybe this desperate measure is why they're a fucked up melting pot. Hell, maybe this is what drove the Romulans from the rage and heightened emotions of their Vulcan ancestors to the secrecy they have today. They're less emotional because they're not 100% Vulcan, and they need to keep it a secret. Anyway, generations of this left some families with more evidence of it on their faces, who because of typical bigotry and conflict chose to move to their own part of Romulus once they arrived.
This is pointless.
Yes, because he's a stubborn northerner like you.
You can even bring the Mentakans and the OBrien, the mysterious Vulcan-adjacent species, into this. During the diaspora, they found possible new homes, and some chose to get left behind, whittling down the numbers of who became the Romulans, leading to ever more desperate measures to keep their people alive. And on the subject of keeping people alive, if you want to support the show more directly, or see the vids early, or get some cool rewards, do check out my Patreon. And my third theory, why is France so English? I know Star Trek Picard said that Picard's family moved to England for a few hundred years, but I'm going to do it a favour and pretend I didn't hear that. The idea that they managed to hold on to that vineyard and it didn't collapse over literally centuries of being unused, and then they recently arrived back, that's just silly. My explanation makes much more sense. It is incredibly simple. There were a lot of wars between now and Trek. What if England conquered France at some point, and English people controlled it for long enough to change French culture, bring in the tea and Shakespeare fixation and all that, and even affect the accent and the language? I mean, French is a dead language in the 24th century.
That is from an obscure language known as French. Counting coup.
Mr. Data, the French language for centuries on Earth represented civilization.
Indeed.
And is there a real-world analogue for this kind of thing in French history? Oh yes, but from the other end, the Norman conquest. The French Normans permanently altered English culture, traditions, the language itself, beyond all recognition. Without the Normans, English today would basically be Dutch. Obviously, there are some more traditional French accents still about. Picard's grandmother, for instance.
Is the end of the universe? Or do you see this as the beginning of it?
But that doesn't damage the theory. Look at England. Some regional accents, such as the North, were created by groups who arrived before the Normans, and still have a distinct accent today. So maybe only part of France was thoroughly anglicised. Anyway, that's enough for now. If I think of 3 more mini-Trek theories, I'll do another video. I have another idea for a much longer video about who actually speaks English and who relies on the Universal Translator, if you'd be interested in that. Some of my conclusions might even surprise you, much like the fact that I have a Ko-fi. It keeps me in minion blood. Check it out if you want.